Today's video is going to deal with one of my very favourite tramroads. It's called the Intake Pit Tramway or Tramroad, and it's unlike the North Staffordshire Railway. It's not big, it's not momentous, it's not remotely famous, but I like it because it's so very typical of what a tramroad the early and mid 19th century would have been, and also because there's surprisingly quite a lot left to see, and it's dead easy to follow. And we started just across the canal from here, there, where there was once a wharf where it joined the Trent and Mersey Canal. Let's go. So I'm now standing on the wharf where the Intake Pit Tramroad once terminated, and here the trucks were loaded onto barges for the canal. It's the whole purpose of the tramroad. You can see it's quite clear where it once was, and like so many tramroads, this one started with an incline. However, before we talk about that, the reason, or one of the reasons why this tramroad so excites me, is that there's a lot to see here that you don't normally get, that you wouldn't really expect to see. And here's the first bit. Have a look at this. This fence post is made from a rail. I'll get a good picture of the cross section of the rail there. As you can see, it's tramroad rail. U-shapes, not like normal narrow gauge railways. And this is, well, one assumes, rail from the actual tramroad itself. And it's not the only bit. Look down here, and covered in the moss, there's several bits more. But if this is not on its own a remarkable survivor, there's even more than that, because just round the corner, what do I find but some actual point pieces from the tramway. And I'm sure if you clean these up, you could actually get them to work. And there's 3 or 4 of these here. I mean, I'll be fair with you, they're very heavy. You need 2 people to lift them. But look at these. These are mid 19th century, I would imagine, if not earlier, tramroad points. Really, really rare artifacts, and it upsets me greatly that these are not in a museum. That's not through want of trying. Several people have asked about putting them in a museum, but the problem is the farmer just won't let you take them. And people have even offered to buy them, and he's just not interested. So for the time being, they've got to stay there. So at least the positive thing is they've stayed there for 150 years or so. Oh, here's another one. Look at this. And you can see there's the footing, and this is the actual rail itself. Wow, what amazing survivors. Please, if anybody is watching who wants to engage in some tramway preservation, there's nowhere better to start than rescuing these rails. Just one final point, there is another fence post here that's made of rail, but I think that rail is normal narrow gauge rail. So does that mean that the track was relayed at one time, or is that from one of the many other tramroads of this area? I think it's probably the latter, because there's so many of the first type that I can't see that, you know, this was of normal rail. So anyway, here we are, we're at the foot of the incline, and this is the great thing, this is a public footpath. So let's go, one final look. Those rails, please somebody rescue those, please do it. And here we go. There's a stone block in the ground here, but it's actually concrete and it says footpath, so I'm pretty certain that's not original. And actually, I don't know, I mean, those rails suggest it could have been a stone block tramroad, but I've not seen one single block of stone with a hole in it. So I suspect that they may have been on wooden sleepers, and certainly the date of this is a little later. I'll give the dates when I get up to the top. It's a little later than the traditional stone block and iron rails tramroad. So we're now on the inclined plane, and I have to say, although I am feeling it is a steep inclined plane, it's not as bad as some of the others that I've climbed up. Now it's not very clear here that we're on an inclined plane because of the undergrowth, as per usual. But perhaps if I turn the camera around, it will become a little clearer. We're looking back to the canal. That stream obviously wasn't there back in the day. There was probably a culvert of some sort. But I'm now back on the inclined plane. And again, it's actually very unclear here as to where the inclined plane was. But I am on it. And actually up ahead, beyond the fence, you can see how this is in a bit of a cut-in. I almost put an electric fence across a footpath here. I'm not quite sure how legal that is. Right, so there we are. Now I actually think the bit that the footpath's following now might not be in the railway tracks. I think the railway tracks is more in this hollow here. And it looks as if it was single track. But I'm not walking in that hollow because it looks very, very swampy. Right, and now back onto what I actually think was the incline plane rather than walking at the side of it. And looking back, you can see through the swampy bit that that was the track bed. And it is actually pretty much dead straight, though it's not clear that way, but this way it's a lot clearer. And we're on a nice embankment here, still going up the incline, and we can actually see now how well engineered and straight it is. Let's go on up. Really quite a significant embankment now. Look at the size there. How high up we are. I'm now just the other side of that bridge, and as you can see here, the road which goes off to the farm actually runs along the incline for a while, which makes going a little easier. Although with these gradients, not that easy. Now at this point the road actually diverges away from the incline, as does the footpath, to go through the yard of a local farm, which we don't really need to see. But the incline's coming away through there, and we're going to pick up the line of the railway in a minute. So there's the farm that my path was diverted to go through, and I am now back on the tramway. So this is leading down, and just beyond that field is where the incline starts. Going the other way though, here is the track of the tramway. As you can see, it's really clear to follow, partly because it's a lane, but because also partly to get through the crown of the hill, as it were. It's in a very slight cutting, and I suppose it was worth doing that, because it would be stupid to rise up to the top of the ground and it would be dropping down again. So I'm now walking along the Intake Pit Tramway again, and the tramway now presents us with a little bit of a mystery. And the mystery comes from the book Turnip Valley Iron, the Mills and the Mines, which is where I've got my information from about the tramway. And to be honest, I don't think there's a lot else written about it anywhere. But that book is a very good book. Anyone who's interested in tramways in this area really do get it. But what interests me here is the map. And so if you have a look at the map, there is the farm, as you can see, and we're now at the bit where it says Old Tramway, going through a bit of a cutting. But as you can see, it then leaves the lane that we're on, going across a field, before rejoining again and then going into the pit. And I don't believe that is what happened. And I'm going to tell you why in a second when we get there. But it doesn't make sense. On the other hand, why would it have been put in there if that wasn't what happened? So there's a little mystery. But before I go on to that, I'm going to talk about why I like this particular tramroad. And I like it because it is so typical. Now, the North Staffordshire Railway of 1815, which is the first video that I made, is a fascinating railway. It was the first public railway in the area. But it is very atypical. For a tramroad, it's long. It's about 6 or 7 miles. Most of them were a mile at most. And this one is probably just under a mile. I haven't seen the measurements. It's also a public railway. It was owned and constructed by a company, the North Staffordshire Railway. Most weren't. Most were built by the people who owned the pit or the quarry to get their goods from their pit or their quarry, which was normally in a pretty inaccessible place, to somewhere where they could be carted away. So they could be road wharves, like we saw at Rangemore on the North Staffordshire Railway, or, and it's more common, canals, which were the trunk lines of their day. And this is typical. We've got a small colliery employing a few men up on the top of a hill, on a moor almost, about a mile or so from a village, and at the bottom of the valley we've got a canal. And so they built their own little tramroad just to get their stuff from mine to wharf, and once the mine ran out, the tramway road fell into disuse. Now here we are. So this is the bit where, according to the map, dead in front of me where that fence post is, the tramway heads off across a field. But I don't believe that's what happened, because there's an embankment going down. It's only slight, but it's there. There's a ditch. Why would the tramway go down an embankment and over a ditch to head across a field when we've actually got a very well engineered, rather too well engineered lane? Lanes aren't normally engineered that well, that cambers nicely and swings round with angles smooth enough for a small train to navigate. To me, this is the tramway all the way. So the mystery is, why did he put it that way on a map? Is it because an old map showed it as going across the field? If so, is that because it did go across the field? Or is that because he looked at the corners and thought, they're probably a bit sharp for a tramway, it probably went across the field. And certainly if you looked at it without being here on the ground, I think that would be a logical conclusion. And I don't know if the gentleman who wrote the book ever did walk. But to me, it's very obvious that I am walking along the railway line. The engineering's too good, it just makes sense. However, in case I am wrong, then the line would have gone across that field there and rejoined somewhere near that tree. Going back to my early topic about this being a very typical tramroad, it's quite interesting because a half a century later, the Foxfield Railway, which admittedly is longer, but not that much longer, was served a very similar purpose. It was constructed by the owner of a coal mine, admittedly a bigger one than this, to take the coal, no passengers, but to take their coal from the mine, which was pretty inaccessible, particularly during the winter, to the canal wharf of its day, which was the main railway line. And so one could say that this line is a direct forerunner of Foxfield, which, you know, is one of the most famous local tourist attractions. And I think that's why it's quite fitting that there's a great collection of tramroad rails at Foxfield. Anyway, we'll walk along a little bit more and then I'll show you the terminus. So I said before that these tramroads were never very long, and as I said, this is a pretty typical one, and we're actually now at the end of the line. And as you can see, the lane is veering off slightly to the right, whereas to the left we've got some bushes, and the maps show that the tramroad itself went there. Now, it's a bit strange because it's all a bit marshy and it doesn't look like any tramroad would be going there, but that's where it says. Whether it went in a bit of a cutting, I don't know to that point. That suggests it would, because the land looks a bit lower there. But that is the route of the tramroad, and the reason that is the route of the tramroad is because in front of us is Intake Pit, or at least where Intake Pit was. Now, interestingly, looking on the map, if we look at the tree, to the left of the tree is where the pit was, and there's a large hole shown on the maps, and there's nothing there now, so that's all been filled in. But this very uneven ground and very marshy ground to the right of the tree, that was also connected with the workings, and beyond it, and I'll show you in a second, is what looks like a pool, which was probably a pool to power the engine for the pit. Like I say, these were small concerns, you know, for maybe 10 men, if that, working in them. And they ran for a while. Some of them never even got a lot of minerals out. And then they folded up and died. And this was the intake pit. And today, very, very little remains, except these ditches and bits of uneven ground. the Intake Pit Tramroad.